story exposes how the powers that be, Big Brother, the Matrix, or whatever imperial organization you think runs this rock, in other words, this planet, keeps you poor. Ride with me. At the age of 19, leaving the US Navy, I did not have a lot of professional skills with civilian applications, so I took a low-level job at a mailroom that paid a little over minimum wage. The problem was the mailroom was in my hood, Jamaica, Queens, New York City, on Queens Boulevard, off of Jamaica Avenue, behind the Wendy's, across the street from the Mickey D's, where my friend got shot. One of the poorest neighborhoods in the country. Rappers 50 Cent and Nicki Minaj are from Jamaica, Queens. The mayor of New York City is from Southside Jamaica, Queens. Same place that the assassination of a cop in his 20s triggered a more aggressive stance on the drug war worldwide. As a matter of fact, George Bush Sr. on the campaign trail cited the assassination as a reason to be more aggressive on the drug war. And while he was in office, his executive order declared that drug traffickers such as Pablo Escobar and others coming from Latin American countries were threats to national security, and thus it will be legal to body them. Let's just slow our roll for a bit so I can drop some science on you. As a minority kid who is brought up in this type of environment, in neighborhoods such as Jamaica, Queens, New York, on which law enforcement agencies like the New York Police Department waged a total, relentless, and merciless war, kids are exposed to people who are older than them with more experience who are up to illicit activities such as selling crack, prostitution, and all kinds of dirt. So even if a child decides to become the outlier and says to him or herself, I'm going to go to school, I am not going to be the person that I see before me, my parents even, or the people that's selling drugs on the street making $1,000 a day, which was good money at the time. They come to a point where they try to submit their resume in various places. They get turned down. They don't have the same connections as people in other areas. And what happens is that if they can't get to a certain place, I mean, I had to learn how to make the proper connections with stakeholders that can have the power to compensate me for the services that I wanted to provide. But that required several levels of sophistication using technologies such as social news aggregators, social media, and such, where a number of children in these areas that I'm talking about, they're not exposed to any of this stuff. And nobody teaches them that because the education system fails to provide a viable path through which they can make money by legitimate means. So that's what happens. They fail at trying to get a good job on their way to becoming a doctor or whatever they say they want to be. And then once they realize or think, because of lack of information, that the only way that they can make anything out of themselves is by becoming a drug dealer or doing other types of dirt, such as sticking people up, prostitution, etc. Then they engage in that, and next thing you know, these kids are serving 3 to 6 year sentences in prisons, and you've got a whole community of people, the majority of people in these neighborhoods and in these areas, who are institutionalized, whether they go to prison or they're out of it. Because even if you are on the streets, people that come back from prison, these are the people to which these kids, they look up. Some of them are in and out. They're so wild that when they come out, they don't care about dying. I knew this kid, he used to blast an Uzi in the air and tell the drug dealers, give me loot. They killed him. They bodied him walking out of his sister's home because he stabbed some dude up who was selling drugs on his block in his face after knocking on his window. So they have this institutionalized mind state, and you have a segment of the population who lives victimized, again, institutionalized, as if they were still slaves to a particular mentality, and thus they have to rely on seeking grants and other forms of government assistance at all times, and they think that that's the only way they can go. We aim to change that here on Raw Squad, which is why I tell you to subscribe to our newsletter, where I list links to a number of resources that will guide you to be anything you want to be. You can find it by subscribing, clicking the link in the video description below. This is where I'm coming from. Not many skills, so every time I was on break, I would hit the hood with my people and come back, and I would take too long, and thus, long story short, I lost that job. Then I took a sales job, which was the easiest job I can get, selling Kirby vacuums for over $1,000. After a couple of weeks of knocking on doors, I finally got to sell one. However, they didn't pay me for it, so I lost that job. Then I worked in the stock market on Wall Street. After making hundreds of calls on a daily basis, I finally sold 150 shares of the Stratosphere Casino out in Vegas. They didn't pay me, so I lost that job. Fast forward, after performing a number of other jobs and hustles, promoting nightclubs, state to state, etc., around 97, I decided to commit to becoming financially successful. So my aunt, who worked at Chase Manhattan Bank, she told me that I should apply to become a teller. I went ahead and applied. After a few months of working at Chase, I decided to up my game, so I enrolled into college, the Borough of Manhattan Community College. During the entrance exam, nonetheless, I was a rapper prior to this. Let me add some context. So I thought I'd be a good writer and I would pass the at least written exam with flying colors, because when you're rhyming, you have to rhyme along a certain structure. Everything has to rhyme, everything has to be on beat. But when you are writing without having to have everything rhyme, then you can just write and you write freely. So I wrote everything. Nonetheless, my writing had no structure whatsoever. I got out of high school by the skin of my teeth, so I did not know how to write an essay. I also failed the math entrance exam, so they stuck me in remedial courses for no credit. One, to learn how to write an essay, the other to do algebra. I didn't even pass that level of math in high school. However, I passed those classes, passed everything else with flying colors, maintained a 3.9 GPA, made the dean's list every single semester, and after playing a cokehead lawyer during my creative writing course, the professor awarded me with an academic achievement award on behalf of the English department, and the chairman of the English department nominated me for a scholarship to New York University. I wanted to go to NYU. NYU awarded me a scholarship because of this award and this nomination to attend their university, where I studied broadcast journalism. However, I was discouraged once I found out that to become a journalist, I had to take on a job as an unpaid intern. By that time, I was not trying to take a job as an unpaid intern. I was already 26 and I had to pay my own bills, pay my own rent, buy my own food. So I was not going to take a full-time job as an unpaid intern, taking all kinds of abuse, fetching coffee for people, while I had to take another full-time job to pay my bills and maintain the dean's list. So I started to focus on trying to climb the corporate ladder at the job that my friend Stu Kwan helped me obtain. I approached the chairman of the company when he requested any ideas from any member of the staff. I sat in the front row. They gave me $100 and I said, listen, right now the organization is not tapping into the power of the Hispanic community. There are a number of organizations that want clips from Hispanic media. As a matter of fact, it was an information retrieval company. So iconic organizations such as Mickey D's, Krispy Kreme, whenever these organizations or celebrities or big names appeared in a news segment, they would contract this organization to go ahead and find that clip, cut it, edit it, record it onto a video cassette, and then send it to them so they could have it for their own research purposes, for publicity, for advertising. A number of organizations were not requesting as much exposure on Spanish language networks because they didn't know what to look for. I knew what to look for, and I was assigned to do the little orders that they got for Spanish language TV. I would even do the closed caption. I would translate it so they would understand it, and the editors would be able to find where the clients of their clients would appear on Spanish language TV. So I got more aggressive with the act of trying to rise in the organization. I wanted to become perhaps like a VP of Spanish language media. I went out to Florida because that's where they mainly kept all of the Spanish language clips. And the VP of the organization out in New York, he even suggested that I move out to Miami. So he was like, why don't you go out there? Because they saw me as a threat. At that time, I had no finesse. I was all aggressive. I was just simply in your face. I was a blunt instrument when it came down to selling and persuading. I was simply telling people that they're missing out on the fastest growing segment of the population, the Hispanic market, around 35 million strong at the time, yada, 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 just breaking it down the same way that you see me speak always. Machine gun rod from the lip. I got a Tommy gun on my jibs. Anyway, so I decided to skip school because I started to get B pluses and I wasn't in school to get B pluses. So my GPA dropped down to like 3.7 or whatever. I wanted nothing less than a 3.9 or 4.0. Left that alone. However, the C-level executives, they started getting scared of me. So they came up with a plan to let me go by saying that I was misidentifying myself, that I was claiming that I was the VP of Spanish language media. Long story short, they laid me off. So I got unemployment and I used that to fund another venture with my friend that got me the job at this information retrieval service. So we started doing mixtapes. I told him, listen, we could do mixtapes. I can get the music from the record companies. I knew that once you approach these record companies, they would give you music that was newly released so you could put it on a mixtape. That's how DJ Clue, DJ Who Kid, DJ Kid Capri, they all got their name. And I had the plan, I had the fire in my belly to still be a rapper because I had rhymed opening up for artists such as Q-Tip, Rod Digger, and other artists back in the day. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to rhyme on these mixtapes. I'll have all this mainstream music on it. And then people will start hearing me, perhaps start recognizing me. And that way I can get some type of distribution deal or simply make money off the mixtapes. We dropped the mixtape. I was earning anywhere from 50 to over $100 every day selling the mixtapes on 42nd Street, on 34th Street. I was hitting all the parades. Then on 34th Street one day, I met a crew that came from Los Angeles selling bootleg t-shirts of the Jay-Z Rock the Mic tour that featured 50 Cent and other artists. So they're telling me they're flipping this stuff. They like the way that I'm flipping my mixtape, and they're telling me they're about to head out to the next stop on the tour, which was in Jersey. I hit Jersey. While we were over there, they started locking everybody up that was selling bootleg t-shirts. So I'm not getting caught up in any of this stuff. I'm not getting locked up for selling mixtapes because anywhere else that you sold mixtapes other than in New York, they considered it bootleg. Although record companies are openly giving you this music, you're not really bootlegging. It's a widely accepted practice way to promote record labels' music. So I tell them, listen, why don't we go sell those t-shirts and my mixtape out in Philly. Philly's got South Street. I was stationed at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard out in Philadelphia, so I knew South Street was off the hook. The next day, we jumped in my hoopty. I had a Caprice, and we trooped it out to Philly. There was a flat on the way. We got that fixed. Finally made it out to Philly, and I was flipping those things like hotcakes. I had a couple of Philly artists on there. I had Benny Siegel. Then I had PD Crack, and they were just hopping on it left and right. Plus, I had some New York music, and I sold about $300 worth of mixtapes that day. However, a crew that had the strip supposedly locked down. I didn't even know they were holding the sale of mixtapes down like that, like if it was crack out in Philly. They approached me, some dudes with bald heads and beards, no mustache, and they were like, listen, it's cool you flipping that mixtape, it's cool what you got, but you can't keep flipping that mixtape out here, dog. And I was like, well, you can't be flipping that Jones. I'm like, word, why not? I mean, you know, it's just my joint right here, and it's different music than what you got. There's room for everybody to eat out here. Nah, it's not like that. They approached me. It was like about 6 or 7 of them. We were only about 3 or 4 people deep. I'm not in my hood, so I'm like, you know what? It's cool. I walked away from them, and while I'm walking away, I'm still selling more mixtapes. And I ran into someone that was an undercover cop, and he said, you're selling that out here? Like, you can get locked up for that. If I didn't have anything better to do, I'd lock you up. He showed me his badge, and I was like, you know what? Let me just boogie. It's not even worth it. While we're going back, we're speaking to the other people with whom these people are connected, the people that had come from LA. I spoke to some of my new acquaintances, family members out in Philly, and they were all open. They were like, wow, like you just clocked 300 bones. You a crazy hustler. I'm running up on people and telling them, listen, you can get all these artists from Philly and from New York, yada, 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 and it costs you less than a cheesesteak. That was my pitch, and I was flipping them, and they liked my style. So they were like, listen, I want to invest. I will call you. Anyway, weeks go by. I took the mixtape out to Jersey Shore. I took the mixtape out to Ohio. Only flipping, again, anywhere from 50 to $100 on a daily basis. Not that much. I wasn't that encouraged to continue when I get the call from my man Tracy in Los Angeles. And he said, bring that mixtape out to Cali. So we're in the middle of dropping another mixtape, me and my man Stu. So, and I'm also taking a course. Remember, if you've seen any of my previous videos, if you haven't, click the subscribe button and click the bell notification to stay on top of every resource that I provide to allow you to be whatever you want to be. You know that I got a grant from New York State to pay for my CDL Class A training. So I was in that training at that time. I told him, once I'm done with the training and I drop this next tape, I'll go out there. He paid for my ticket and I trooped it out there. However, I only sold about no more than 30 mixtapes, if I'm not mistaken, because that's when I found out that there were different markets for rap music at that particular moment in time. I'm not sure if it still works like that now. People on the East Coast only like East Coast music, and people on the West Coast only like West Coast music. In fact, the market was so segmented out in the West Coast that Mexicans only wanted to hear rappers that were Mexican, or Chicano rather, like Be Real and the dudes from Cypress Hill, while everybody else was into E40, Snoop, Dr. Dre, Death Row, etc. So that's when I learned, and I didn't sell that many. As a matter of fact, we were about to have to snatch a gun from some dude that didn't want to pay us back because we paid him to duplicate our CDs. So you know what? There's too much drama for this hustle that's clearly not working. There was an opportunity out there. My man had his uncle. He had a credit repair operation. And I was still articulate because, again, I'm a writer. Creative writing, got a scholarship into NYU, and I'm like, I could do this. So I call my wife and I tell her, listen, I'm going to send you some money. Overnight, my wool pinstripe Brooks Brothers suit, I'm going to get busy. I went to his office and I told him, listen, I can help you sell this stuff. Let's do it. So I started building relationship with real estate professionals, and I started selling thousands of dollars of credit repair. However, I found out that this dude was dealing with like some Korean mobsters or something like that, and he had problems with the FBI. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to boogie. I managed to finance a car out there, and I just left. I told my wife, listen, we're leaving. The day before we were about to leave, like around 4 o'clock in the morning, I heard a wind go. And I was like, you know what? We're bouncing right now. We jumped in the car, hit the supermarket. I sold the camera that I had on me for like 50 bucks. Got some lunch meat and some Wonder Bread and a couple of bags of sunflower seeds, and we were ghost. In Vegas, we had some Chinese food up in some food court somewhere, and we were ghost. And I ran out of money around the Rocky Mountains or so. So I called my mother, my beloved mother. She sent me $1.50 and told me she had problems with my brother and his girl at the time. So I'm like, man, I can't go over there. I got to go back to New York, get this money. I got to get my life back together, this, that, and the third. She's like, all right, cool. But if you can't stop by, stop by. So I'm thinking about it. I'm traveling east towards New York City. Once I got to St. Louis, I had an opportunity to bust that right to go to Florida. I busted it right down to Florida. And I went back to my house, regulated the entire situation there. And about a month later, I was like, I have to get a job. So I looked at the classifieds. First job listing was for a help desk representative at an ISP called Bell South that served the southern states. So as soon as I called, they're like, what's a nick? To try to see whether I even qualified for the job. I said, it's a network something. Something slick enough that the person was like, all right, you can come tomorrow so you can take the test, see if you qualify. So that night I stayed up until 4 o'clock in the morning studying everything that I could find on the web on about.com, most specifically about computers. What is a hard drive, RAM, ROM. And the next day, I took my laptop, tucked it under my armpit, wiped the grease off of it, and I took the test with the laptop open. Got a perfect score, and I told them about my experience installing the POS system, installing my hard drive back home, and I used all of the terminology that I had picked up. I was fully loaded with everything, and she was like, you really know your stuff. They hired me on the spot, $12 an hour. So I'm working. During my off days, I'd split an order of curly fries from Checkers with my wife at a local Kinko's. I would use them for a high-speed DSL connection, broadband connection at the time, and I was learning internet marketing. Fast forward a year later, I'm working for another ISP out in Woodbury, New York called Cablevision. And there I started making a couple of $100 a week selling affiliate products. The main one with which I enjoyed most success was a database to organizations that distributed opportunities to make money by taking surveys and participating in focus groups. So I'm just making this money on autopilot. It's amazing to me. All the information that I picked up setting up these ads on Google, once I started to present them to executives, they found out that they didn't know this stuff, but they needed it. So I took a job as a telemarketer where I helped register over 10,000 attendees to the Donald Trump Think Big Expo on behalf of the Learning Annex. The Learning Annex is an educational organization. So I took every single class that they offered on search engine optimization to enhance my skills, sales, how to land a six-figure job, how to be a personal trainer, how to dance salsa, everything. Just so you can see how they keep you poor, how they keep this education from you, because they don't offer that in the educational system. I'll give you the rest of the science on that shortly. Keep watching. My success in registering over 10,000 attendees to the Donald Trump Expo set up my portfolio where I got a job with the luxury services industry. I started working with a private jet company, and I started working with other organizations, went from making $10 an hour to $150,000 in less than 1 year. Fast forward, I started learning how to use social media and how to distribute a large, gargantuan amount of traffic to publications worldwide. So I learned that through a blog. And now get this, I started using social news aggregators like what you know of today as Reddit. Back then, the big social news aggregators was an organization called dig.com. You submitted content and you shared it with your friends. We had a whole crew of top diggers, and we would vote on each other's content. And once it was promoted to popularity, any content that we promoted would be exposed to the millions of users. The website would receive about 1,000 people every single minute. If your hosting server was not equipped to handle that much traffic, it would crash and the website would go down. So I got an idea, because these social news aggregators, they would always allow you to promote content on mainstream publications a lot easier than content on fly-by-night or mom and pop type blogs or organizations' websites. So I was like, you know what? I can take this form of driving traffic and just start sending traffic to these mainstream publications and make connections. That's exactly what I did. So I started sending traffic to Forbes.com, most specifically. I also got a gig with the Huffington Post due to my relationships with people that already had connections. Every single publication wanted to get down with people who were operating Dig. So I started sending traffic for years, actually. I got a gig with the Huffington Post, got another gig with Forbes because I was driving so much traffic to their publication, first to random reporters, then to the executive editor, Brett Nelson. And I got his attention because all of his articles became the most viewed content on the website. So I started sending them emails. I'm like, I just sent you 20,000 people to this particular article. I sent 100,000 to this particular article, yada, yada, yada. And he was like, wow, that's awesome, dude. What can I do for you? I was like, yo, why don't we meet? So we met out in the city. I'm like, why don't we meet at Chop? He's like, I got something better. He took me to a nice place where I had some salmon, arugula salad. Bottom line is like, listen, you've done so much for me. What can I do for you? I was like, can I write for Forbes? Like, you a writer? I was like, absolutely. I got a scholarship at the NYU for writing. Say no more. I will sign you up. He signed me up and he made me a paid contributor. I was making about 2 cents for every single view that I drove to one of my articles. So we come up with the idea, 10 social media myths for business. I dropped the content. He helped me write it as well. I got a check for $2,000 for that article right on Forbes. So after all of this, after trying to pitch my stories, I did not include that part, that once I got out of NYU, I decided to try to pitch my stories to various magazines, one being the New Yorker. They just sent me a rejection letter reading that the story was not for them. After weeks of doing this until 4 o'clock in the morning, I did not find a way to launch my writing career. However, after learning how to market by reading a blog and then attending search conferences across the country, I learned how to approach people, how to make connections, which is the key thing that is missing in the educational system today. And I was able to be a professional writer. And since I've been able to write for, again, Forbes, PBS, a number of organizations, I've worked with the Nielsen organization, I've drove millions of unique visitors, potentially in the billions right now, to publications nationwide, globally, as a matter of fact, generating millions of dollars for these organizations because that's what they want. I've worked with Adweek, with the Nielsen Company, with Billboard, with the Hollywood Reporter, and that all being through the education, because before all of this, I was a blunt instrument in terms of selling things, but then I got the technical ability of learning how to sell my services. I read books on how to sell things. As a matter of fact, I started reading about Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and all of these thought leaders on marketing and sales when I was out in California. So I was like, you know what? The key thing that is keeping me poor is my lack of education. I studied in one of the most iconic universities on the planet that charges many people tens of thousands of dollars every single semester just so they can have the privilege of attending, the quote privilege of attending, and they don't give you an education that allows you to find work in the profession for which you trained. So that's the problem with the educational system. They educate you with a lot of technical information that you do use. Nonetheless, I have just discovered that because everything that you do, you know, the research and all this other stuff, you're still doing it now. When you are releasing content on the web, you are using this stuff nonetheless. You have to have the persuasive ability to be able to persuade people who are in stakeholding positions to have you compensated for the work that you perform. That is what's missing, and they want to keep you poor, so you only have the ability to perform technical jobs where you're an employee and you're coming out of your pockets mostly for taxes. You know, a lot of wealthy people, they don't pay any taxes. So you, of course, as an employee, is forced to foot the bill for all the services, the infrastructure in this country and on this planet. That is why on our spreadsheet, where I list links to all kinds of resources that teach you to be whatever you want to be, I have a free education tab where you can learn how to be a search engine optimization marketer. You can learn how to operate ads online, how to manage that for clients so you become a cybersecurity professional. You can learn how to code, whatever it is that you want to do. I mean, and that is only a pixel of all the resources available in the information age, most specifically on the internet. You can access our spreadsheet by subscribing to our newsletter at bit.ly/NeilRod. I have included a link in the video description below. And that's just one way they keep you poor. Of course, you know that central bank stakeholders, they keep interest rates low to ensure that you have enough credit. So regardless of whether you can afford a $1,000 to $2,000 phone, you have access to go ahead and purchase this. And all of these companies, they pay these politicians to ensure that you are always buying, that you always become the consumer. What you need to do is take control of your consumption. If you need to spend some money on educating yourself, to learn how to sell, how to develop funnels, to learn how to get people's contact information so you have a database of people, thousands of people to whom you can broadcast an offer and sell your product or service to a portion of those people, you will financially free yourself and finally escape the rat race, because the education that we have not been able to leverage as much as we are supposed to is not enough. Watch the video you see on the screen right now and smarten up.